long before cities rose beside highways, before bridges crossed enormous rivers, before pipes carried water beneath streets, and before anyone imagined civilization as a network of nations and borders. There was simply water moving through the land, a narrow stream slipping between stones, a river widening across a valley, a seasonal channel appearing after the rains, a spring emerging quietly from beneath the earth. People followed these waters because water made almost everything else possible. It gave animals places to gather, plants something to grow around, and human beings a reason to remain in one place. Long before the first great monuments appeared, rivers were already shaping the conditions that would allow them to exist. The story of civilization is often told through kings, armies, temples, writing, and cities. But underneath all of those things is an older story, a story that begins with flowing water. Every field that produced food, every settlement that grew into a town, every road that crossed a valley, and every civilization that gathered thousands of people into one place depended in some way upon water. Tonight, as we slowly travel backward through time, we will follow some of the hidden rivers that helped build the human world, not as a journey through battles or famous rulers, but as a quiet journey through valleys, wetlands, ancient channels, forgotten floodplains, and landscapes where water once moved differently from the way it moves today. Imagine standing beside a river before sunrise, when the land is still dark, and the only sound is the gentle movement of water over stones. There are no buildings on the horizon, no lights, no roads, and no voices. Yet, somewhere nearby, perhaps hidden beneath layers of soil, are the remains of an ancient settlement. The river beside you may have changed course many times, but the water is still performing the same basic work it has always performed. It carries minerals, shapes soil, fills wetlands, nourishes plants, transports sediments, and connects distant landscapes. Human civilization would learn to do something remarkable with this moving water. It would settle beside it, divide it into channels, redirect it toward fields, build bridges across it, use it to transport goods, and eventually construct entire cities whose existence depended upon the river continuing to flow. At first, however, there were no cities to build. There were small groups of people moving through landscapes, following seasonal resources and learning where water could be found. Rivers were among the most reliable guides in a world where survival depended heavily on understanding the environment. A river could lead toward food, animals, fertile ground, and other human communities. Its banks could provide drinking water, reeds, wood, fish, birds, and plants. Floods could be dangerous, but they could also leave behind rich layers of soil. The same water that destroyed a temporary camp could make an entire valley fertile for generations. Over long periods of observation, people learned the rhythms of these rivers. They noticed when water levels rose, when fish appeared, when certain plants grew, and when the ground became easier to cultivate. The river became more than a source of water. It became a calendar, a road, a boundary, a food source, and eventually the foundation of agriculture. Somewhere in this slow relationship between people and water was one of the most important transformations in human history: the transition toward permanent settlement and food production. Agriculture did not appear everywhere in exactly the same way, and rivers were not the only environments where farming developed. But flowing water repeatedly created favorable conditions for intensive cultivation. A valley with dependable water and fertile soil could support more people than a landscape where rainfall was unpredictable. Once communities learned to grow crops reliably, they could remain near the same fields year after year. Houses became more permanent. Storage structures became larger. Tools became specialized. Population increased. Villages expanded. And gradually, the possibility of civilization emerged. One of the clearest places to see this relationship is the great river system of northeastern Africa. For thousands of years, the Nile flowed through an environment where the surrounding landscape could be extraordinarily dry. Yet, the narrow valley beside the river could support dense agricultural communities. The river was not merely a line of water through a desert. It was a moving corridor of life. Seasonal flooding spread water and sediment across parts of the floodplain, helping replenish agricultural soils. Communities learned to work with the river's rhythms, cultivating crops when conditions allowed, and using channels, basins, and other forms of water management to improve production. Along the river, settlements became increasingly connected. Boats could move people and goods. Agricultural products could be transported. Stone and other materials could travel downstream or upstream, depending on the season and technology available. The river reduced some of the difficulties created by the surrounding desert because it provided a continuous route through a landscape that would otherwise be difficult to cross. The civilization that developed along the Nile would eventually build enormous temples, tombs, administrative centers, and monuments. But those achievements were made possible by something much simpler: a dependable relationship with water. The Nile also demonstrates why rivers should not be imagined as passive resources. A river has its own rhythms. It rises and falls. It changes channels. It carries sediment. It creates wetlands and islands. It responds to rainfall far upstream. People can adapt to some of these changes, but they cannot completely control the river. Ancient communities had to observe it carefully. The timing of planting and harvesting was connected to water levels. Settlements had to be positioned, with some awareness of flooding. Boats had to be designed for the river's conditions. Administrative systems developed partly because coordinating agricultural production across a large river valley required information and organization. When enough people depend upon the same water system, managing that system becomes a social problem. Someone must decide where channels are built, who maintains them, how water is distributed, and what happens when a flood damages infrastructure. In this way, the river begins to shape not only agriculture, but also institutions. Water management can encourage cooperation, but it can also create competition. A community upstream may want more water, while another community downstream depends upon receiving it. A canal can help one field while leaving another without enough supply. The river, therefore, becomes part of politics long before anyone thinks of politics as a separate institution. Far to the east, another great river system helped create one of the world's earliest urban civilizations in the broad region between the Tigris and Euphrates. Here the landscape was different from the Nile Valley. The rivers flowed through a generally dry region, and their behavior could be unpredictable. Flooding did not always occur at exactly the same time or in the same way, and the challenges of agriculture encouraged communities to develop extensive irrigation systems. Canals carried water away from the rivers and toward fields. Embankments helped control flooding. Drainage became important because too much water could be as damaging as too little. Over generations, people transformed parts of the landscape into an intricate network of fields and channels. From above, if such a view had been possible, the region would have appeared as a living web of water. The rivers were natural, but the canals were human-made extensions of those rivers, carrying their water into places where crops could grow. This relationship between natural and artificial waterways became one of the defining features of early civilization. The cities that emerged in Mesopotamia depended upon this water network. Places such as Uruk, Lagash, and other urban centers became large communities supported by agricultural production from the surrounding countryside. Temples and administrative institutions grew. Writing developed partly within the needs of managing goods, labor, land, and resources. Records could track grain, livestock, workers, and other forms of wealth. It is easy to imagine writing as an abstract intellectual invention, but some of its earliest uses were deeply practical. A growing civilization needed ways to remember what had been collected, distributed, stored, or owed. Water management created agricultural surplus. Agricultural surplus supported larger populations, and larger populations created more complicated systems of administration. The clay tablet could therefore be connected indirectly to the canal. The The writing system and the irrigation system belonged to the same expanding world of organized resources. Civilization was becoming more complex because the landscape was being managed more intensively. But irrigation had consequences. Water carries salts, and in dry environments, repeated irrigation without adequate drainage can gradually change the chemistry of soil. Over long periods, agricultural productivity can be affected by salinization. Ancient farmers did not understand soil chemistry in the modern scientific sense, but they observed what happened to fields. Some areas remained productive, while others became increasingly difficult to cultivate. The history of rivers is therefore not simply a story of human mastery. It is also a story of unintended consequences. Water can create fertile land, but managing water incorrectly can eventually damage that same land. Civilizations had to adapt continually to the systems they were creating. The canals that supported cities required maintenance. Sediment accumulated, banks weakened, channels changed. Labor was needed to keep water moving where people wanted it to go. The more a society depended upon irrigation, the more important that maintenance became. And yet, beneath all of these complexities, the basic image remains wonderfully simple. A river moves through a dry landscape. Someone digs a channel. Water enters the channel. It flows toward a field. Seeds grow. Food is harvested. A village stores some of it. A larger population becomes possible. Houses multiply. A market appears. A temple rises. Officials begin keeping records. Roads connect the settlement to other communities. Boats move along the river. The city grows. No single moment creates civilization. Instead, thousands of small decisions accumulate around water. People observe the river, adapt to it, modify the landscape, and pass their knowledge to the next generation. This process happened in many parts of the world, sometimes independently and under very different environmental conditions. Rivers did not create civilization through one universal formula. Instead, they provided opportunities that human communities responded to in different ways. Some societies relied heavily on seasonal floods. Others developed complex irrigation. Some built settlements on river terraces above flood levels. Others constructed embankments and canals. Some used rivers primarily for transportation. Others depended more heavily upon fisheries, wetlands, or floodplain agriculture. The important point is that flowing water created connections. It connected mountains to plains, forests to wetlands, villages to cities, and inland communities to distant seas. A river was never only the water visible at a single location. It was part of an entire watershed extending far beyond the horizon. When rain falls on a mountain, the water begins a journey. Some enters the soil. Some runs over rocks. Some gathers in streams. Smaller streams join larger ones. larger rivers move toward lowlands. Sediment is carried along the way. Nutrients are transported. Valleys are shaped. Floodplains develop. Wetlands appear. Eventually, the water reaches a lake or the sea. Human communities living anywhere along this journey are connected, whether they realize it or not. A settlement downstream depends upon conditions upstream. A flood may begin far away. A drought may affect the entire basin. Pollution or soil erosion can travel with the water. Long before modern environmental science, human societies were already living inside these connected systems. They simply understood them through experience rather than through satellite images and hydrological models. Tonight, as we follow these ancient waterways, it is useful to imagine civilization not as a collection of isolated cities, but as a pattern drawn across landscapes by water. The river comes first, then the settlement. The settlement grows, then roads connect it to other places. Fields spread across the floodplain. Boats begin carrying goods. Markets appear. Administrative systems develop. Temples and public buildings rise. Eventually, the city becomes large enough that people may forget how completely its existence depends upon the water beneath it. The monumental architecture becomes visible, while the river becomes background scenery. But the relationship never disappears. The city still needs water. The fields still need irrigation. The population still depends upon food produced within the watershed. Even today, modern cities built far from ancient floodplains remain connected to rivers, reservoirs, aquifers, and distant watersheds through enormous systems of pipes and infrastructure. The hidden rivers of civilization are therefore still with us. Some flow openly beneath bridges. Others have been diverted into canals. Some have changed course. Some ancient channels are now dry, visible only through differences in soil or vegetation. Others are buried beneath modern cities. Archaeologists can sometimes identify old riverbeds from layers of sediment, satellite imagery, or changes in the landscape. A river that disappeared thousands of years ago may still explain why an ancient settlement existed where it did. The city may now stand in what appears to be an unlikely location, surrounded by dry ground. But beneath that landscape may be the remains of an older water system. Civilization leaves ruins, but rivers leave traces too. The deeper we travel into the past, the more we begin to see water as a kind of invisible architecture. Stone walls can disappear, wooden buildings decay, roads shift, political borders vanish, but rivers continue shaping the land. Even when a river changes course, the old floodplain may remain fertile. Ancient channels may leave subtle depressions. Wetlands may appear where groundwater remains close to the surface. Vegetation can reveal where water once moved. The landscape remembers in physical ways, even when written history does not. And so, before the great cities, before the monumental temples, before the first rulers were carved into stone, there was water. It moved through darkness and sunlight, through forests and deserts, across plains and valleys. People watched it. They followed it. They feared it. They depended upon it. Eventually, they learned to shape their lives around it. The first civilizations were not built simply beside rivers. In a deeper sense, they were built through relationships with rivers. Their food systems, transportation networks, settlements, economies, and political institutions developed within watersheds. The river was not the background to civilization. It was one of its foundations. And now, as the night grows quieter, imagine the sound of one ancient river flowing beneath a sky without city lights. The water moves over stones that have never known a road or a bridge. Reeds bend gently along the bank. Birds settle into the darkness. Somewhere far upstream, rain is falling. Somewhere downstream, a small settlement sleeps beside the water. No monument has been built yet. No king's name has been carved into stone. No historian has written the story. There is only the river, carrying water through the darkness, slowly shaping the land upon which generations will eventually build their world. The river that flows quietly through the darkness is never truly alone. Even when no human settlement is visible, its water is connected to an enormous landscape. Small streams descend from hills and forests. Springs emerge from underground. Rainfall gathers on distant slopes. And countless tiny channels eventually join the larger current. A river is therefore a kind of moving memory of everything that happens across its watershed. Soil from the mountains can travel downstream. Leaves and organic material enter the water from forests. Sediment settles along floodplains. Nutrients move toward wetlands and fields. For ancient communities, much of this process was invisible, but its effects were obvious. The land beside a river could be greener than the land farther away. Certain fish appeared at predictable times. Birds gathered around wetlands. Floods left behind fresh layers of mud. Plants grew where water remained close to the surface. People learned these patterns through generations of observation. Long before anyone could describe a watershed scientifically, communities were already living according to its rhythms. One of the most remarkable examples of this relationship can be found in the ancient Indus region, where cities developed around a broad network of rivers and seasonal waterways. The civilization, often called the Indus Valley civilization, flourished across parts of what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, with major settlements including Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Their cities contained carefully planned streets, wells, drainage systems, buildings, and other infrastructure that reveal an extraordinary level of organization. Water was was not simply something obtained from a nearby river. It was incorporated into the design of urban life itself. Wells provided local access to groundwater. Drainage channels helped remove used water. Houses were arranged in ways that allowed water to move through the settlement. The sophistication of these systems suggests that water management was not an afterthought. It was part of the basic structure of the city. When we imagine these places today, we often picture brick walls and ancient streets. But we should also imagine the water moving beneath and around those streets, because the city could not have functioned without it. The Indus landscape also reminds us that rivers can change. Ancient river systems do not always remain where they are today. Channels migrate, floodplains shift, and some waterways become smaller or disappear. Climate changes can alter rainfall patterns, while tectonic activity can influence the direction of rivers. Human settlement can also change the way water moves. When archaeologists discover a city that once depended upon a watercourse that no longer appears significant, the landscape can seem mysterious. Why build a major settlement here? Why invest enormous labor in streets, wells, and buildings? Sometimes the answer becomes clearer when researchers reconstruct the ancient environment. A river or seasonal channel that was important thousands of years ago may now be hidden beneath fields or dry plains. The ancient city was not misplaced. The landscape has changed around it. This is one of the quiet mysteries of rivers. They seem permanent because water keeps flowing, but the course of a river can change dramatically over centuries. A bend may become an abandoned channel. A flood can create a new path. Sediment can gradually raise the riverbed. A stream may divide into several channels before joining again. Human communities must adapt to these changes because their fields, roads, houses, and cities depend upon the water remaining within a useful range. A settlement placed too close to a river may be vulnerable to floods. A settlement placed too far away may struggle to access water. Ancient builders, therefore, had to understand the landscape through experience. They learned where the river could be trusted and where it could not. Across the plains of northern China, another great civilization developed through a complex relationship with rivers and floodwaters. The Yellow River became famous for the enormous quantities of fine sediment it carried, which gave the river its distinctive color and contributed to the fertility of surrounding landscapes. But the same sediment could raise riverbeds and increase the risk of catastrophic flooding. Communities living near the river, therefore, faced a constant challenge. The water that made agriculture possible could also destroy settlements and fields. Managing the river became an enormous social task. Embankments, channels, reservoirs, and other forms of water control developed over long periods, and the ability to organize large numbers of workers became increasingly important. The story of the Yellow River reveals something deeper about civilization. When thousands or millions of people depend upon a river, water management becomes a collective problem. A single family can dig a small irrigation ditch, but controlling a major river requires cooperation, labor, planning, and authority. Someone must decide where a barrier should be built. Someone must organize workers. Materials must be transported. Repairs must be made after floods. Information about water levels must travel. Communities upstream and downstream may have competing needs. As these problems become larger, societies often develop institutions capable of coordinating large projects. In this sense, the river does not simply provide resources for civilization. It can influence the development of organizational structures. Ancient Chinese traditions contain many stories about heroic efforts to control floods. And while legendary narratives cannot simply be treated as literal historical records, they reflect how deeply water management became embedded in cultural memory. The struggle against flooding could be imagined as a struggle against chaos itself. A ruler who successfully managed water could demonstrate that he was capable of protecting the people and maintaining order. The river therefore became both a physical and political force. Its behavior could affect harvests, migration, settlement patterns, and perceptions of leadership. Farther south, the great river systems of Southeast Asia created a very different but equally important relationship between water and urban life. The Mekong and its tributaries spread across enormous floodplains, while seasonal rains transformed landscapes throughout the year. Wetlands, lakes, channels, and flooded forests created environments rich in fish and plant life. Communities developed ways to live with changing water levels rather than simply trying to eliminate them. In some regions, houses and infrastructure were adapted to seasonal flooding. Boats became essential forms of transportation. Water connected communities that would otherwise have been separated by forests and wetlands. One of the most extraordinary examples of a civilization shaped by seasonal water was the Khmer civilization centered around Angkor. The enormous temple complexes are often the first things people imagine when they hear the name Angkor. But beneath the stone architecture was a vast hydraulic landscape. Reservoirs, channels, ponds, embankments, and other structures helped manage water across the region. The great reservoirs, sometimes called barrays, were enormous human-made bodies of water. Their exact functions and meanings have been debated, but there is no question that water management played a major role in the organization of the Angkorian landscape. The city was not simply a collection of temples surrounded by jungle. It was part of a carefully modified environment in which water was stored, redirected, and incorporated into agriculture and urban life. Imagine approaching Angkor before sunrise, long before modern tourism. The air is humid. Mist hangs above the water. The massive stone towers are still dark silhouettes against the sky. Around them, channels and reservoirs reflect the first light. The sound of insects comes from vegetation near the water. A narrow boat might move quietly along a channel. Somewhere nearby, workers are preparing fields. The temples are impressive, but the surrounding water infrastructure is just as important to understanding how such a large population could be supported. Stone monuments survive because stone is durable. Water systems are harder to see because channels fill with sediment. Vegetation grows over embankments, and ancient reservoirs can become part of the natural landscape. The hydraulic civilization can therefore become hidden beneath the forest. This pattern appears repeatedly in history. The most visible remains are often the least representative of daily life. Temples, palaces, walls, and monuments attract attention because they are dramatic and durable. Water channels, drainage systems, fields, wells, and small bridges are less spectacular, but they often tell us more about how ordinary people lived. A monumental temple may require a powerful ruler or religious institution, but a city requires food and water every day. The hidden infrastructure is what keeps the population alive. The same principle can be seen in ancient Rome. The Roman world became famous for its roads, armies, amphitheaters, and monumental architecture. But Roman cities also depended upon enormous water systems. Aqueducts carried water from springs and rivers across considerable distances, using carefully calculated gradients to move water without modern pumps. Once inside a city, the water could supply fountains, baths, households, workshops, and other facilities. Drainage systems carried waste and stormwater away. The famous Roman baths were not simply places of leisure. They were demonstrations of the importance of water to urban life and engineering. An aqueduct crossing the countryside can look almost timeless today. Stone arches stretch across a valley, and the structure seems monumental. But its original purpose was practical. Water had to move. The people who designed and maintained these systems needed detailed knowledge of terrain, construction, materials, and flow. The engineering was impressive because the problem itself was enormous. A city with tens of thousands of residents requires water continuously. Wells alone may not be enough. Local springs may not provide sufficient supply. A reliable external source becomes valuable, and bringing that water to the city requires infrastructure. Rome, therefore, transformed water into an urban network. The river remained important, but water could also be captured, transported, stored, distributed, and removed through engineered systems. This was a major step in the history of cities. Once water could be moved deliberately, settlements no longer had to remain directly beside every natural source. Human engineering expanded the range of places where large populations could live, but the river remained at the heart of Rome. The Tiber connected the city to the wider landscape and to the Mediterranean world. Boats could carry goods. Flooding could threaten neighborhoods. Bridges connected different parts of the city. The river was simultaneously useful and dangerous. Roman civilization did not conquer water completely. It developed systems for living with it. The same tension appears throughout the ancient world. Rivers provide abundance and risk at the same time. A flood may replenish soil or destroy a settlement. A river may make transportation easier or prevent movement across its banks. A canal may bring water to fields or create problems with drainage. A reservoir may protect a city from drought or become useless if sediment accumulates. Human beings constantly negotiate with water rather than simply controlling it. This negotiation became especially important as populations grew. A small village can move if conditions become difficult. A large city cannot move easily. Once thousands of people depend upon houses, markets, temples, roads, fields, and political institutions, the cost of abandoning the settlement becomes enormous. The larger the civilization becomes, the more it must invest in maintaining its relationship with water. Canals need clearing. Embankments need reinforcement. Wells need cleaning. Reservoirs need management. Bridges need repair. Flood defenses need inspection. Water systems become permanent responsibilities. This creates an interesting paradox. Rivers help civilization grow, but civilization creates dependence upon infrastructure that must be maintained. A community may become prosperous because of irrigation, then become vulnerable if the irrigation network fails. A city may expand because of a reliable water supply, then struggle when its population grows beyond the capacity of that system. The success created by water can eventually create new problems. Ancient cities therefore had to think about storage as well as flow. A river may be abundant during one season and low during another. Rainfall may be unpredictable. Reservoirs, cisterns, ponds, and wells allowed communities to store water for later use. Storage changed the relationship between humans and seasonal weather. Instead of depending entirely on water arriving at the moment it was needed, people could collect it and use it later. This principle remains fundamental today, although modern reservoirs and water systems operate at enormous scales. In arid regions, underground water became especially important. Springs and aquifers could support settlements far from major rivers. Some ancient communities developed systems for bringing groundwater to the surface or transporting it through underground channels. In parts of Persia and surrounding regions, Qanat systems carried groundwater through gently sloping tunnels toward settlements and fields. These systems were ingenious because they allowed water to travel beneath the surface while reducing evaporation in hot climates. A landscape that appears dry above ground could therefore contain an invisible network of flowing water below. Imagine walking across such a landscape at night. The surface appears empty, but beneath your feet, water is moving through darkness. Somewhere farther downhill, that water will emerge near a settlement. People will collect it. Fields will receive it. Trees will grow around it. The settlement exists because of a river you cannot see. This is perhaps the purest example of a hidden river. Water traveling beneath the earth, shaping human life without appearing on the surface. The Persian world developed extensive knowledge of irrigation and water management, and these traditions influenced settlements across a broad region. Water architecture became part of the cultural landscape. Gardens, channels, pools, and fountains transformed dry environments into carefully managed spaces of shade and vegetation. The idea of a garden could therefore be deeply connected to water. A garden was not simply plants arranged for beauty. In a dry climate, the presence of flowing or stored water could represent extraordinary effort. Water became both practical necessity and aesthetic experience. The relationship between water and beauty appears repeatedly in ancient civilizations. People who depended upon rivers also celebrated them. Water was incorporated into religious symbolism, gardens, public spaces, and architecture. It could represent fertility, purity, life, movement, or renewal. The same river that supplied irrigation could also become sacred. The same spring that provided drinking water could become associated with a deity or local tradition. Humans rarely treat essential resources as purely practical. Over time, they acquire cultural meaning. And so, the river becomes more than geography. It becomes memory. It becomes identity. It becomes a boundary between places and a connection between them. It becomes a source of stories. It becomes a reason for cities to exist. Even when the original river changes course, the memory of its importance can remain in the name of a city, the location of an ancient ruin, or the shape of an old road. Tonight, as the imagined landscape grows quieter, the rivers continue their journeys. The Nile moves through its valley. The Tigris and Euphrates cross their ancient plains. The Indus and its related waterways shape the landscapes of South Asia. The Yellow River carries sediment across northern China. The Mekong spreads through wetlands and floodplains. The rivers of the Roman world continue toward the Mediterranean. Beneath dry landscapes, underground channels still carry water. some ancient waterways remain visible. Others are hidden beneath fields, roads, forests, and modern cities. Civilization grew around these waters, but the rivers themselves were never concerned with civilization. They continued their physical work long before people arrived, and long after particular cities disappeared. They carried sediment, carved valleys, filled floodplains, and moved toward the sea. Human beings built temporary structures along their paths and imagined those structures would last. Some did, many did not. The water remained. And perhaps that is why, when we listen carefully to a river at night, it can feel older than history itself. It does not speak in names or dates. It speaks through movement. It reminds us that beneath every city is a landscape. Beneath every landscape is water. And beneath every civilization is a long relationship between people and the physical world that supports them. As civilization expanded, rivers began doing something more than simply supporting settlements. They began connecting them. A river could carry a person farther than their feet could travel in a day, and it could carry goods that would have been difficult to move over land. Timber, stone, grain, pottery, metals, textiles, animals, and countless other materials could travel along waterways. A settlement located beside a navigable river was therefore connected to places that might otherwise seem impossibly distant. The river became a road that moved beneath the sky. Unlike a land road, it did not always require a cleared surface, and once people developed suitable boats, the current could become part of the journey itself. In some circumstances, moving downstream required relatively little effort compared with carrying heavy goods overland. Upstream travel was more difficult, but even then, rivers could provide routes through landscapes where mountains, forests, deserts, and marshes made land travel slow. Over time, these waterways created networks of exchange that helped transform isolated communities into interconnected regions. The earliest river travelers did not need enormous ships. A simple raft, a hollowed log, a bundle of reeds, or a small wooden boat could be enough to cross a stream or move along calm water. As boat-building knowledge developed, vessels became larger and more specialized. Different environments encouraged different designs. A shallow river required a different boat from a deep lake or open sea. Reeds could be ideal materials in some regions, while timber was more practical in others. The boat itself became another expression of adaptation to water. Just as people learned to build houses suited to particular climates, they learned to build vessels suited to particular rivers. A boat allowed a person to become part of the river's movement, to float rather than walk, and to carry more than could easily be carried by hand. Along the Nile, boats became essential to the movement of people and goods. The river offered a natural north-south route through a landscape travel across the surrounding desert could be difficult. Stone used in monumental construction could be transported along the water. Agricultural products could move between settlements. Officials and travelers could travel between administrative centers. The river connected the communities of the valley into a larger cultural and political system. A person living near one part of the river could be linked economically to people living many days away. The river made distance more manageable. It turned geography into a network. The same principle operated along the Tigris and Euphrates, where boats could move goods between settlements and connect agricultural regions with urban centers. Rivers also linked inland communities to broader trade routes leading toward the Persian Gulf and beyond. Once river systems connected with seas, the scale of movement could become enormous. A small settlement beside a stream might eventually become part of a trade network stretching across regions. Materials from distant mountains could reach cities in lowlands. Metals, timber, stones, spices, textiles, and other goods could travel through combinations of river and overland routes. Civilization was becoming increasingly interconnected, and water was one of the most efficient ways to maintain those connections. Trade did more than move objects. It moved ideas. A merchant traveling between cities carried information as well as goods. Techniques could spread from one region to another. Religious ideas, artistic styles, writing practices, technologies, and stories could travel along the same routes. A river therefore became a corridor, not only for material exchange, but also for cultural exchange. The civilization beside one river could influence another civilization many hundreds of kilometers away, because merchants, travelers, migrants, and officials moved through connected waterways and roads. The movement of water helped create movement of people, and the movement of people helped create movement of ideas. This becomes especially visible when we look at the great trading civilizations that developed around the Mediterranean and its connected rivers. The Nile flowed toward the Mediterranean, while rivers and roads across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East connected inland communities to coastal ports. The sea itself became another enormous waterway, but rivers remained the paths that carried goods inland. A port city was valuable partly because it connected maritime routes to river routes and roads. Goods arriving by ship could be transferred to smaller boats or carts and carried deeper into the interior. The landscape became a layered network of transportation. The Romans understood this very well. Their roads are famous, but rivers were also deeply integrated into the empire's economy. The Tiber connected Rome to the sea. The Rhine and Danube became major transport corridors and frontiers. Smaller rivers connected agricultural areas to larger settlements. Military units could use waterways to move supplies. merchants could transport heavy goods more efficiently than they could by land. Grain, timber, wine, pottery, and other materials traveled along rivers. The empire was held together not only by roads and armies, but also by networks of water. The Rhine and Danube are particularly interesting because they demonstrate how rivers could become political boundaries. A river can separate communities because crossing it requires effort, but it can also connect them because boats can travel along it. The Romans treated major rivers as strategic frontiers in some regions, constructing forts and settlements along their banks. Yet even where a river marked the edge of Roman territory, trade and cultural exchange could continue across the water. The boundary was real, but it was porous. People could cross. Goods could move. Languages and customs could mix. A river could therefore be both a line and a bridge. This dual nature appears throughout human history. Rivers separate and connect at the same time. A wide river can create a natural barrier between two communities. But once a bridge or ferry exists, it can become the easiest route between them. A river may divide political territories while serving as a commercial highway. It may define a border on a map while remaining part of the daily life of both sides. This complexity made rivers central to politics. Control of a crossing could mean control of trade. Control of a waterway could provide economic advantages. A city positioned at a strategic river crossing could become wealthy and powerful. Bridges were therefore among the most important pieces of river infrastructure. A bridge looks simple from a distance, but constructing one requires an understanding of water depth, current, foundations, materials, and seasonal changes. A bridge must withstand moving water and changing levels. In flood-prone environments, this is difficult. Ancient engineers developed many different approaches, from wooden structures to stone arches. Some bridges lasted for centuries. Others were repeatedly rebuilt after floods or war. The bridge became a physical symbol of human cooperation with the river. It does not stop the water. It creates a temporary path across it. Ferries were another solution. Where bridges were too difficult or expensive to construct, boats could carry people and goods from one bank to the other. A ferry crossing could become a permanent feature of a settlement. Houses, markets, inns, and roads would develop around it. The river crossing could become a place where travelers met, information spread, and trade occurred. A simple stretch of water could therefore become the center of a community. River crossings also influenced the location of cities. A settlement near a reliable crossing could benefit from travelers. A city at the junction of two rivers could become a major commercial center. A town where a river became navigable from the sea could serve as a gateway between inland and maritime economies. Geography created opportunities, but human beings recognized and developed them. The city grew because people understood what the river made possible. One of the most enduring examples of this is the city of London and its relationship with the River Thames. Although its history belongs to a much later period than the earliest river civilizations, the principle remains the same. The Thames created a transportation route, a commercial corridor, a source of water, and a strategic location. The city grew around its river and eventually became one of the world's great urban centers. The same pattern can be seen in Paris along the Seine, Cairo along the Nile, Baghdad along the Tigris, and countless other cities whose identities remain inseparable from their waterways. But rivers did not only create opportunities for trade, they also shaped settlement through the availability of food. Fish could become an important part of diets. Wetlands provided birds, reeds, shellfish, and other resources. Floodplains could support fertile agriculture. Riverbanks could provide clay for pottery and mud brick construction. Reeds could become roofing materials, baskets, mats, boats, and countless other objects. Trees growing near water provided timber and fuel. The river was therefore a collection of resources rather than simply a source of drinking water. The importance of reeds is easy to overlook. In wet environments, plants growing along rivers can become fundamental materials for human life. They can be woven into mats, baskets, walls, roofs, and boats. A single plant can therefore become part of architecture, transportation, storage, and daily life. The riverbank becomes a kind of natural workshop. People gather materials, transform them, and return to the water for more. This relationship between humans and river vegetation existed long before large cities and continues in some traditional communities today. Clay was another important river resource. Floodplains often contain fine sediments that can be shaped into pottery or used for bricks. In Mesopotamia, mud brick became one of the defining building materials because stone was not always readily available. Entire cities could be constructed from material produced by the river. Walls, houses, temples, and administrative buildings rose from earth carried by water. The river therefore provided not only the food and water needed to support the population, but also some of the physical material used to build the city itself. This creates a fascinating cycle. Water carries sediment. People collect sediment-rich earth. Bricks are made. Buildings rise. Buildings eventually collapse. Their bricks become part of the archaeological layers of the city. Rain and wind slowly erode the remains. The landscape accumulates new layers. Thousands of years later, archaeologists excavate the site and discover that the city itself was built from material connected to the river. Civilization literally became architecture through water. The Nile Valley offered another version of this relationship. Mud from the river could become part of the fertile soil that supported agriculture, while stone from distant regions could be transported along the river for monumental construction. The movement of water, therefore, connected natural resources to human construction. A quarry might be far from a building site, but if a river route existed, heavy stone could be transported more efficiently. This helped make large-scale architecture possible. The great monuments of ancient Egypt, therefore, had a hidden river behind them. When we imagine enormous stone blocks being moved across the landscape, it is easy to focus only on the laborers and construction techniques. But the river was an essential transportation system. Stone could be moved by boat when water levels allowed. Materials could travel along the valley. Food could be supplied to workers. The river connected quarry regions, agricultural communities, and construction sites. The monumental landscape was therefore partly a river-built landscape. This does not make the river responsible for the achievements of civilization. Human beings designed, organized, built, and maintained these systems. But the river created conditions that made certain possibilities more practical. Civilization emerges from the interaction between environment and human decisions. Water provides opportunities and constraints. People respond. Their responses create new possibilities and new problems. One of the greatest changes came when humans began deliberately altering rivers on a large scale. Canals could redirect water. Dikes could reduce flooding in some areas. Embankments could protect fields. Reservoirs could store water. Drainage channels could remove excess water. Bridges could cross currents. Aqueducts could transport water over long distances. These structures represented a major shift in the relationship between humans and rivers. People were no longer simply settling beside water. They were redesigning parts of the water landscape. But redesigning a river is never simple. Water follows gravity. If a channel is built incorrectly, water may not flow where intended. If a canal becomes clogged with sediment, its capacity decreases. If an embankment fails, flooding can occur. If irrigation removes too much water, downstream communities may suffer. Every intervention creates consequences elsewhere. The larger the system becomes, the more interconnected those consequences become. This is why ancient water management required knowledge accumulated over generations. People learned by observing. They remembered where floods had occurred. They knew which channels needed cleaning. They knew when to plant. They knew where wells could be dug. They understood the behavior of local water sources through experience. Much of this knowledge was practical rather than theoretical. It was passed from parent to child, teacher to student, worker to apprentice. In many ancient communities, water management therefore became a form of inherited wisdom. A canal worker might know exactly where sediment accumulated. A farmer might recognize the signs of an approaching flood. A boatman might understand currents that were invisible to outsiders. A well digger might know where groundwater was likely to be found. These people possessed specialized knowledge that was essential to civilization, even if their names were never recorded. History often preserves the names of rulers and generals because written records were produced by institutions concerned with power. The people who maintained water systems rarely received the same attention. Yet, without them, the cities would have struggled to survive. Civilization depended on ordinary expertise. The farmer who knew when to open an irrigation gate could be as important to the survival of a community as the official who collected taxes. This is one reason the hidden rivers deserve attention. They reveal the foundations beneath the visible achievements of civilization. A palace is impressive, but a palace needs water. A temple is beautiful, but its priests need food. A city wall is powerful, but the people behind it need agriculture. A marketplace can flourish, but goods must arrive. A written record can preserve a king's order, but someone must carry out that order in the physical landscape. Water touches every layer, and the farther we follow the river upstream, the more connections appear. The city depends upon the fields. The fields depend upon irrigation. The irrigation depends upon the river. The river depends upon rainfall and mountain snow. The mountains depend upon climate. The entire civilization therefore exists within a chain of physical relationships, extending far beyond the city itself. This is the meaning of a watershed. Modern geography gives us the term, but ancient people lived within watersheds, whether or not they had a formal scientific concept of them. A community beside a river was connected to everything upstream and downstream. Today, satellites allow us to see entire river basins from above. We can trace water from mountain headwaters through valleys, cities, farms, wetlands, and deltas before it reaches the sea. Ancient people could not see the whole system at once, but they experienced pieces of it every day. The river's journey eventually reaches the delta, where the moving water slows and divides into channels. Deltas can become incredibly fertile landscapes, but they are also unstable. Channels shift, islands appear and disappear, sediment accumulates, marshes expand and contract. Human settlements in deltas must adapt constantly. Yet these landscapes can support enormous populations because rivers deposit nutrients and create productive wetlands. The Nile Delta became one of the great agricultural regions of the ancient world. The Mekong Delta would later become another enormous center of human settlement and agriculture. The Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta became one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. These places demonstrate the extraordinary productivity that can emerge where rivers meet the sea, but they also reveal vulnerability. Floods, storms, changing channels, and rising water levels can threaten communities. abundance and danger exist side by side. At night, a delta is a world of water and darkness. Channels reflect the moon. Reeds move in the wind. Small boats rest near the banks. Fish move beneath the surface. Birds settle among wetlands. Somewhere upstream, the river is carrying sediment toward the sea. Somewhere farther inland, people are sleeping beside fields that depend upon the same water. The delta is the final expression of the river's long journey across the continent. But even here, the river is not finished. The water enters the sea, where currents carry it farther. Evaporation returns some of that water to the atmosphere. Clouds form. Rain falls again over mountains and plains. Small streams begin once more. The river's journey becomes part of the larger water cycle. Civilization depends upon this cycle, but the cycle does not depend upon civilization. The water was here before the first city. It will remain after many cities have disappeared. And for thousands of years, human beings have built their homes, farms, roads, temples, bridges, and dreams along its path. As the great rivers carried water toward the sea, they also carried the memory of entire landscapes with them. Every grain of sand, every particle of soil, every fallen leaf and piece of organic material became part of a moving system that connected places separated by enormous distances. A river could begin in a cold mountain valley and eventually pass through forests, grasslands, farms, cities, wetlands, and deserts before reaching the ocean. Along the way, human communities learned to depend upon different parts of the same system. Mountain villages depended upon springs and streams. Farmers depended upon floodplains and irrigation. Cities depended upon wells and channels. Merchants depended upon navigable stretches of water. Coastal communities depended upon deltas and estuaries. None of these people needed to understand the entire river system to become part of it. Their lives were connected simply because water connected them. This becomes particularly clear when we look at the civilizations that developed around the Ganges. The river was not merely a source of water, but a major cultural, agricultural, and spiritual presence across the Indian subcontinent. Its enormous basin supported agriculture and settlement across a vast region. Tributaries joined the main river, creating a network of waterways that connected communities across northern India. Seasonal monsoon rains brought enormous quantities of water into the system, while the river carried that water through plains that became some of the most productive agricultural landscapes in South Asia. People learned to live with the changing rhythms of the river and monsoon. Villages developed around fields and water sources. Towns grew along trade routes, and major cities emerged where geography and commerce brought people together. The river became part of religious traditions as well. demonstrating how a physical landscape can gradually become part of a civilization's deepest cultural identity. The idea that a river can become sacred is found in many societies. Water gives life so directly that people naturally develop symbolic relationships with it. Springs may become associated with healing. Rivers may become connected with purification. Floods may be interpreted as signs of divine power. Rain can represent fertility and renewal. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was deeply connected to the agricultural cycle and religious imagination. In Mesopotamia, rivers were part of a world understood through gods, floods, fertility, and order. In South Asia, major rivers became central to religious traditions that continue into the modern world. The practical and spiritual meanings of water often existed together. A person could depend upon a river for irrigation and also regard it as sacred. There was no contradiction in seeing water as both physical necessity and spiritual presence. This relationship also influenced the location of settlements. People were drawn toward water for practical reasons, but sacred places could attract settlements as well. A riverbank might become a place of pilgrimage. A crossing might become a market. A spring might become a shrine. A confluence where two rivers met could become especially meaningful because the landscape itself created a natural meeting point. Geography could therefore shape both economic and religious life at the same time. The same location might serve as a place to trade, travel, pray, gather, and live. The great cities of South Asia demonstrate another important characteristic of river civilization: the importance of monsoon rainfall. Unlike environments where one predictable seasonal flood dominates the agricultural calendar, monsoon regions can experience dramatic shifts between wet and dry periods. Water may arrive in enormous quantities during part of the year and become much less abundant during another. Communities therefore needed ways to capture, store, redirect, and distribute water. Ponds, tanks, wells, canals, reservoirs, and other systems became important throughout different regions and historical periods. These structures allowed communities to extend the usefulness of seasonal rainfall beyond the moment when it fell. A reservoir can seem very ordinary compared with a temple or palace, but its importance can be enormous. A body of stored water can support drinking, animals, agriculture, and crafts. It can provide a buffer during dry periods. It can become part of a settlement's social and religious life. People gather around it. Paths develop beside it. Vegetation grows around its edges. Over generations, the reservoir becomes part of the landscape. If the settlement disappears, the reservoir may remain as a quiet depression or body of water, still reflecting the sky. Across the Indian subcontinent, traditional water harvesting systems took many forms. Stepwells are among the most striking. These structures descended deep into the ground, allowing people to reach water even when the surface level changed. Elaborate stepwells could contain staircases, platforms, columns, and shaded spaces, combining practical engineering with architecture. They reveal an important truth about water infrastructure. Necessity can produce beauty. A structure built because people needed water can become a remarkable work of architecture. The practical and the artistic do not have to be separate. The same principle appears in ancient Persia, where qanats carried groundwater through underground tunnels. It also appears in Roman aqueducts, Egyptian irrigation systems, Chinese flood control projects, and the hydraulic landscapes of Southeast Asia. Across different continents, people repeatedly faced the same basic challenge. Water is essential, but it does not always appear where or when people need it. Human ingenuity responded by creating systems that moved water through landscapes. These systems changed the scale of civilization. Once water could be transported and stored, people could live in places that would otherwise have been difficult to inhabit. Agricultural land could expand beyond natural riverbanks. Cities could grow beyond the immediate reach of wells. Dry landscapes could become gardens. Urban populations could increase. Water management therefore became one of the foundations of urbanization. But urbanization also increased pressure on rivers. As cities grew, they produced more waste. Water that entered a city clean could leave carrying sewage, industrial materials, and other pollutants. Ancient societies did not understand pollution in modern scientific terms, but they understood that dirty water could be unpleasant or dangerous. Drainage systems developed partly because communities needed to remove waste and excess water. In some ancient cities, sanitation infrastructure was remarkably sophisticated. The Indus cities, for example, contained carefully planned drainage features that show an understanding of the importance of managing wastewater. The distinction between bringing water in and taking water out is crucial. A city needs both. Clean water must enter. Used water must leave. Rainwater must be managed. Floodwater must be controlled. Wells must be protected. A settlement that solves only one of these problems remains vulnerable. Ancient urban planners, therefore, had to think about the movement of water in multiple directions. This is why the word river can be misleading if we imagine only a natural channel. Civilization created entire artificial river landscapes. Canals, drains, reservoirs, aqueducts, wells, ponds, and irrigation channels became extensions of natural waterways. In some places, the boundary between natural and artificial became difficult to see. A canal could be so old that generations considered it part of the landscape. A reservoir could become surrounded by trees and villages. A drainage channel could become a permanent stream. Human engineering and natural processes blended together. Over centuries, these systems could transform entire regions. Wetlands could be drained. Floodplains could be cultivated. Forests could be cleared for agriculture. Rivers could be redirected. New channels could be dug. Lakes could be expanded or reduced. These changes allowed populations to grow, but they also altered ecosystems. Fish habitats could disappear. Sediment patterns could change. Flooding could move to different areas. The history of civilization is therefore also a history of environmental transformation. Sometimes those transformations were successful for centuries. Other times they created problems that became visible only much later. A river system can tolerate a certain amount of modification, but every landscape has limits. Too much irrigation can cause soil salinity. Too much deforestation can increase erosion. Too many embankments can change flood patterns. Overuse of groundwater can lower water tables. A civilization can become powerful by modifying its environment, while simultaneously making itself more dependent upon that modification. This vulnerability is one reason civilizations sometimes appear to disappear suddenly when the actual process was gradual. A city may decline because of political conflict, economic changes, disease, migration, climate shifts, environmental degradation, or combinations of many factors. Water can be part of the story without being the only cause. A river may change course, reducing access to water or transportation. A drought may weaken agricultural production. A flood may destroy infrastructure, but people also adapt. They migrate, they dig new canals, they change crops, they alter settlement patterns. Civilization does not simply collapse when nature changes. Human beings constantly respond to environmental pressures. The ancient city of Teotihuacan in Mesoamerica provides another fascinating example of civilization and water. Even though its relationship with rivers differs from the classic river valley civilizations, the city developed in the highlands of central Mexico, where springs, lakes, rainfall, and engineered channels all played important roles. Water was incorporated into the city's design, including drainage and hydraulic structures. The civilization was not built directly beside a giant river like the Nile or the Euphrates, reminding us that the broader story is not simply civilization equals major river. The deeper story is that complex societies depend upon reliable water systems, whether that water comes from rivers, springs, lakes, rainfall, groundwater, or engineered networks. The Maya world provides another example. Many Maya cities were located in environments where large permanent rivers were not always available, particularly in the limestone landscapes of the Yucatan Peninsula. Communities developed reservoirs, cisterns, and other methods of storing seasonal rainfall. Some cities depended heavily on natural sinkholes known as cenotes, while others created artificial storage systems. The absence of a major surface river did not prevent civilization. Instead, people developed different relationships with water. This reminds us that rivers were powerful foundations of civilization, but human societies were remarkably creative in adapting to environments without them. The Andes offer another contrasting example. Civilizations developed in mountainous landscapes where rivers flowed through narrow valleys and water descended from high elevations. Irrigation systems allowed agriculture on steep terrain. Terraces transformed mountain slopes into productive fields. Channels carried water across difficult landscapes. Here, the river was part of a vertical world, moving from high mountains toward lower valleys. The landscape itself became a hydraulic structure shaped by gravity. Imagine following an Andean stream from its source. At the highest elevations, snow and ice contribute to streams. Water moves rapidly through rocky channels. Farther down, the river enters narrower valleys. People build terraces along slopes. Channels carry water toward fields. Villages develop near reliable sources. Eventually, the water continues toward larger river systems and the Pacific. A single drop of water may therefore pass through several ecological zones during its journey. Human communities at different elevations depend upon different parts of that journey. The ancient civilizations of the Andes demonstrate another important feature of water. Elevation changes create opportunities for different forms of agriculture. Crops suited to highlands differ from those suited to lower valleys. Communities can exchange products through vertical trade networks. Water connects these ecological zones physically, while roads and human movement connect them economically. Civilization becomes a web extending up and down the mountains. The Inca later developed sophisticated systems of roads, terraces, irrigation channels, reservoirs, and settlements across the Andes. Their empire was not centered on a single great river valley. Instead, it was spread across an enormous mountainous landscape. Water management was essential because agriculture had to adapt to steep slopes, seasonal rainfall, and varied climates. Springs were carefully incorporated into settlements. Channels carried water toward fields and ceremonial spaces. Terraces reduced erosion and created more usable agricultural land. Once again, water infrastructure was hidden beneath the more famous monuments. This pattern repeats so often that it becomes difficult to imagine civilization without it. The visible achievements are usually placed at the center of the story, but the invisible systems supporting them are often more important. A palace cannot feed itself. A temple cannot drink. A city cannot grow crops on stone. A population cannot survive without water. The river is therefore the quiet infrastructure beneath history. It rarely receives the same attention as kings and conquerors, but it outlasts them. A ruler may control a kingdom for decades. A dynasty may survive for centuries. A river basin can continue shaping human life for thousands of years. Even when a river changes course, its old influence can remain. Ancient settlements may sit beside abandoned channels. Fields may still follow ancient floodplain patterns. Modern roads may trace routes first established because a river crossing existed. Cities may retain names connected to waterways. Religious traditions may preserve memories of sacred rivers. Modern populations may still depend upon ancient irrigation systems that have been repaired and modified over generations. Water creates continuity because it forces people to solve the same basic problems repeatedly. How do we obtain it? How do we store it? How do we transport it? How do we keep it clean? How do we protect ourselves from too much of it? How do we share it? These questions are ancient, and they remain relevant today. Perhaps that is why the sound of flowing water feels so timeless. The river does not belong to one civilization. It has seen many. A stream may have flowed beside a village that later became a city, then beside ruins, then beneath a modern bridge. The people changed, the language changed, the buildings changed, the river continued. At night, this continuity becomes easier to imagine. The modern world grows quieter. Artificial lights disappear from our mental picture. We imagine a valley without roads, a city without electricity, a field without machinery. The river remains. Its sound fills the darkness. Somewhere along its banks, an ancient settlement is sleeping. Somewhere farther downstream, another community is awake. Somewhere upstream, rain is falling on the mountains. The water connects them all. And so the hidden history of civilization continues not in palaces, but in channels, wells, springs, wetlands, reservoirs, and rivers. These are the places where human beings learned to cooperate with landscapes, where food production became possible, where cities found their foundations, and where distant communities became connected. The river flows quietly onward. It carries no monument. It carries no king. It carries only water. And yet, in that water, entire civilizations found the possibility of becoming something larger than a village beside a stream. As the night deepens, the story of the rivers becomes quieter, but it does not become smaller. We have followed water from mountains into valleys, from valleys into plains, through ancient fields and cities, beneath bridges and across floodplains, and finally toward the sea. Everywhere the pattern is similar. Water creates possibility, and people respond to that possibility. Sometimes they settle beside the river. Sometimes they build channels to bring it farther into the landscape. Sometimes they raise walls against it. Sometimes they build boats, and allow the river to become a road. Sometimes they store it in reservoirs or guide it beneath the earth. And sometimes they simply learn to live with its changing moods. Over thousands of years, these responses accumulated into the foundations of civilization. Yet, rivers also reveal the limits of human control. No matter how sophisticated a canal becomes, water still follows gravity. No matter how high a wall is built, an extraordinary flood may exceed it. No matter how carefully a reservoir is designed, drought can reduce it. No matter how powerful a city becomes, it cannot create water from nothing. The river always remains part of a larger natural system. This becomes especially important when we think about ancient civilizations that depended upon seasonal floods. Flooding is often described as a disaster from the modern perspective, but for many early agricultural communities, controlled or predictable flooding was part of the agricultural cycle. Floodwaters could spread sediment across fields and replenish nutrients. When the water receded, farmers could plant crops in newly moist soil. The challenge was not always to prevent flooding completely, but to understand it and make use of it. This distinction is important because ancient water management was rarely a simple battle between humans and nature. People were often trying to cooperate with natural rhythms. They built systems that captured some water, redirected some, stored some, and allowed some to move freely. The goal was not necessarily to make the river behave like a machine. It was to make human life possible within the river's behavior. The ancient landscape was therefore full of seasonal movement. A field might look dry for months and then become green after the rains. A river channel might become shallow during one part of the year and powerful during another. Wetlands could expand and contract. Lakes could rise and fall. Communities learned to anticipate these changes. Their calendars were partly environmental calendars. The arrival of rain, the changing level of a river, the appearance of fish, the growth of particular plants, and the ripening of crops all provided information. In this sense, ancient farmers were observers of climate and hydrology, even though they did not use modern scientific terminology. Their survival depended upon noticing small changes. The river also shaped social memory. A major flood could become part of local storytelling. A drought could be remembered by generations. A particularly successful harvest could become associated with a ruler or a period of prosperity. Communities preserved memories of water because water affected survival so directly. This may explain why flood stories appear in so many cultural traditions. The details differ, but the basic experience is familiar. Water can rise beyond expectations, transform the landscape, and force people to seek safety. Such memories can preserve ancient experiences long after the original environmental conditions have changed. At the the same time, water could create abundance so great that communities had to develop ways of storing surplus. Agricultural civilization depends upon the ability to survive periods when production is low. Grain storage, granaries, underground pits, warehouses, and other systems allowed communities to preserve food. Water and food storage were closely connected. A good harvest depended on water, and a stable population depended on the ability to preserve the resulting food. This created another layer of infrastructure beneath civilization. Fields produced food, storage protected it, roads moved it, markets distributed it, and political institutions managed portions of the process. Large populations also created new demands. A village might obtain water from a nearby stream, but a city containing tens of thousands of people requires much more. Wells may be dug deeper. Aqueducts may be constructed. Reservoirs may become larger. Public fountains and baths may appear. Drainage systems may expand. Water becomes a public concern rather than simply a household concern. This transition is one of the reasons urban water systems became so important in ancient history. The city could no longer depend entirely upon people individually finding their own water. Shared infrastructure became necessary. Ancient Rome provides perhaps the most famous example, but it was not unique. Many civilizations developed sophisticated systems for bringing water into settlements. What makes Roman aqueducts so striking is the scale and engineering precision. Water could travel many kilometers from springs and sources to cities, often through channels carefully designed to maintain a gentle gradient. Some sections passed underground, while others crossed valleys using bridges and arches. The visible aqueducts are impressive, but much of the system was hidden. The water itself was the true purpose. Once inside the city, it entered a network that supplied public and private users. Water could become part of fountains, baths, gardens, workshops, and sanitation systems. The modern world has inherited this basic principle, but expanded it enormously. Today, water can travel hundreds of kilometers through pipelines, tunnels, canals, and pumping systems. Cities can exist far from natural rivers because technology allows water to be transported from distant watersheds. Yet, the underlying dependency has not changed. The city still depends upon a source somewhere. The river may be invisible, but it has not disappeared. It has simply been moved farther away from the place where people experience it. This is one of the great hidden truths of modern civilization. A person living in a high-rise apartment may turn on a tap without seeing the river, reservoir, or aquifer that supplies it. Water appears instantly because an enormous infrastructure stands between the person and the natural source. Ancient people often experienced this connection more directly. They walked to rivers, wells, ponds, springs, or channels. They could see the source. Modern systems can hide the relationship, but they cannot eliminate it. The same is true of food. Modern agriculture can move water across continents through irrigation and transportation systems, making it possible for cities to consume crops grown hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Ancient cities were more locally connected to their surrounding landscapes, but the principle was already present. The food in a city came from somewhere, and that somewhere depended upon water. Civilization, therefore, creates a chain of dependence that extends beyond the city walls. If we follow that chain backward far enough, we eventually reach rainfall. Rain falls on mountains. Water enters streams. Streams become rivers. Rivers spread across valleys. Fields absorb the water. Crops grow. People eat. Cities grow. And the cycle begins again. This simple sequence is more powerful than many monuments because it explains why civilization was possible in the first place. The river was not merely beside civilization. The river was inside it. It shaped the location of settlements, the movement of people, the production of food, the development of trade, the organization of labor, and the cultural imagination of entire societies. It influenced where people built temples and markets, where roads crossed, where armies traveled, and where political boundaries formed. It became part of religious symbolism and everyday routine. And yet, rivers are always moving. That movement creates another important lesson. Nothing built beside a river is completely permanent. The water slowly changes its surroundings. Sediment accumulates, banks erode, channels shift, floodplains expand, islands appear, wetlands change. A city may try to hold the river in place, but the river remains part of geological time. Human buildings may last centuries, while the river continues its work for thousands or millions of years. This is why archaeological landscapes can be so fascinating. A ruined city may stand beside an apparently small stream, and it can be difficult to imagine that the waterway was once larger. In another place, an ancient settlement may lie far from the modern river, suggesting that the river changed course. The landscape itself becomes evidence. Archaeologists and geographers can reconstruct ancient waterways through sediment layers, soil patterns, satellite imagery, pollen, and other clues. The hidden river can sometimes be found even when the visible river has moved. Some ancient rivers have disappeared almost completely. Their channels have been filled by sediment or transformed into agricultural land. Vegetation can grow differently along the old course. Slight depressions can remain. Beneath the surface, layers of river deposits preserve evidence of water that flowed thousands of years ago. These buried waterways are among the most literal hidden rivers of civilization. People may have built cities beside them, farmed their floodplains, traveled along their channels, and eventually abandoned them, leaving the river buried beneath the landscape. The disappearance of a river can change the destiny of a settlement. If a waterway becomes too small, changes direction, or becomes difficult to navigate, a city may lose part of its economic advantage. Agricultural systems may need to be rebuilt. Wells may become more important. Trade routes may shift. People may migrate toward other sources of water. A settlement that once stood at the center of a network can become peripheral. This does not always mean sudden collapse. Often the change is gradual, unfolding across generations. Civilization, therefore, has a rhythm similar to the river itself. It grows, changes direction, divides, joins with other systems, expands, contracts, and sometimes disappears. New settlements rise over old ones. Roads follow older roads. Modern cities develop near ancient sites because the same geography remains useful. Water continues to attract people, even after the original civilization has vanished. Perhaps this is the deepest reason rivers built civilization. They did not simply provide a resource. They created geography that encouraged connection. They offered routes through difficult landscapes. They concentrated fertile land. They brought people together. Once people gathered around water, they exchanged goods, ideas, stories, technologies, and beliefs. The river became a corridor of human interaction. And so, as we prepare to follow the water toward the end of our journey, imagine one final ancient landscape before sunrise. A broad river moves slowly through a valley. Mist hangs above the water. Reeds move gently along the shore. Beyond them are fields, still dark beneath the fading night. Farther away, the faint outline of a city rises above the plain. There are temples, houses, storage buildings, walls, and roads, but none of them are visible in detail yet. The city is quiet. The people are sleeping. Somewhere inside, a lamp is still burning. The river has been flowing all night. It was flowing before the city existed. It will continue flowing after the city changes. And as the first light begins to appear, the water catches the pale sky and carries it downstream. The civilization wakes beside it. ID equals P6 final. As the first light reaches the ancient river, the landscape slowly returns from darkness. The mist above the water becomes pale silver. The reeds along the banks begin to show their shapes, and the distant fields emerge from the shadows. Somewhere beyond the river, a few birds begin their morning calls. The city is still mostly quiet, but the first signs of movement are appearing. A person approaches the water. Somewhere else, a fire is being prepared. A boat rests near the bank, waiting for the day's journey. The river itself has not changed. It continues its slow movement toward the distant sea, carrying water gathered from mountains, rainfall, springs, tributaries, and countless smaller streams. the civilization beside it is waking, but the river has never slept. It has flowed through the night, just as it flowed through the previous night and the thousands of nights before it. If we could stand here thousands of years ago, we would probably notice how much of the world remained outside human control. The river could be used, but it could not be commanded completely. The fields could be cultivated, but the weather could not be guaranteed. Canals could be dug, but they needed maintenance. Reservoirs could store water, but they could eventually dry. Boats could travel, but storms and currents could change their journeys. People built systems to make the landscape more predictable, but uncertainty always remained. Civilization was therefore not the triumph of humans over nature in any simple sense. It was an ongoing negotiation with nature. People observed the world, learned its patterns, built around them, and adjusted when those patterns changed. This negotiation is perhaps the central theme of the entire story of civilization and water. Humans did not create rivers, but they learned to live beside them. They did not create rainfall, but they learned to collect it. They did not create springs, but they learned to protect them. They did not control mountains, but they learned to guide mountain water toward fields. They did not stop floods entirely, but they learned to build settlements and infrastructure that reduced some of their effects. Every generation inherited a landscape shaped partly by nature and partly by the work of earlier generations. The result was a remarkable accumulation of knowledge. A farmer knew the best time to plant. A boatman knew the currents. A canal worker knew where sediment gathered. A builder knew how to construct a bridge. A well digger knew where water might be found underground. An administrator knew how to organize labor for a major irrigation project. A religious leader knew the traditions associated with a sacred spring or river. A merchant knew which waterways connected one market to another. These different forms of knowledge overlapped and created a civilization. We often describe civilization through its most visible achievements. We speak of pyramids, temples, palaces, walls, statues, roads, and written records. But every one of those achievements depended upon less visible systems. A monument required food for workers. Workers required water. Food required agriculture. Agriculture required rainfall or irrigation. Materials required transportation. Transportation depended upon roads or waterways. Administrators needed records. Records required trained people and materials. The entire structure was interconnected. The river was one of the deepest connections of all. It linked the mountains to the plains. It linked villages to cities. It linked farmers to markets. It linked forests to construction sites. It linked inland communities to the sea. It linked one generation to another. And in some places, it linked the living to their memories of the dead. A river could become part of a civilization's identity so deeply that even after political systems disappeared, the river remained central to the culture. People continued to gather along it. Cities continued to use it. Religious traditions continued to honor it. Names remained attached to it. Stories were passed down about floods, crossings, droughts, journeys, and sacred places. The river became part of the mental map of the civilization. This is why ancient rivers can still feel strangely familiar. Even when we visit them as modern travelers, we can understand the basic attraction immediately. Water is calming. It reflects the sky. It supports vegetation. It creates movement. It offers a place to stop and look. Human beings have been drawn to rivers for practical reasons for thousands of years. But there is also something emotionally powerful about flowing water. Perhaps the sound reminds us that time is moving without requiring us to measure it. The river does not rush to reach the sea. It simply continues. One moment becomes another. One bend becomes another. One generation becomes another. Civilization followed a similar rhythm. Cities grew gradually. Roads expanded. Fields spread. Populations increased. Institutions became more complicated. New technologies appeared. Old systems changed. Sometimes civilizations flourished for centuries. Sometimes they declined. But the water continued moving through the landscape. Even the civilizations that disappeared left traces behind. Ancient irrigation channels can still be seen in some landscapes. Old wells remain. Reservoirs survive as ponds or depressions. Archaeological sites reveal drainage systems and water storage. Ancient bridges have left foundations. Old river ports can sometimes be identified through excavations. The physical remains remind us that water management was not a minor feature of ancient life. It was central to it. Some of the most fascinating discoveries come from places where the river itself has disappeared. Beneath a modern field, researchers may find ancient sediments indicating that a large channel once flowed there. A settlement that now appears isolated may suddenly make sense. Its location was not random. It was beside water. The river moved later, or became smaller, or disappeared as climate and geography changed. The people did not necessarily abandon a bad location. The landscape changed around them. This reminds us that rivers operate on timescales much longer than individual human lives. A person might notice a change in a river over a decade. A community might remember a major flood over several generations. But the river itself changes continuously. Its banks erode slowly. Sediment accumulates. Channels shift. Floodplains evolve. What seems permanent to a person may be temporary in geological time. Civilization is temporary too. A city that appears permanent to its inhabitants can become ruins. A road can become a field. A canal can become a dry depression. A harbor can become inland. A river can change course. A palace can collapse. A monument can become buried. And yet the landscape continues. Grass grows over ruins. Trees take root beside old walls. Rain fills forgotten channels. Water finds pathways through abandoned structures. Eventually, nature begins to reclaim the spaces created by human beings. This is not necessarily a story of defeat. It is simply the normal rhythm of the planet. Humans build, maintain, change, abandon, and rebuild. Rivers continue their physical processes regardless of political history. The hidden rivers that built civilization, therefore, offer a quiet lesson about human ambition. People have always tried to create permanence. They build stone walls because stone seems durable. They dig canals because they want water to move in predictable directions. They construct reservoirs because they want to store the future. They build cities because they want communities to last. And often these achievements do last for surprisingly long periods. But nothing is completely permanent. The river reminds us gently. Water moves. Time moves. The world changes. And because everything changes, the value of civilization is not necessarily in making things last forever. It is also in what one generation can pass to another. Knowledge can be inherited. Techniques can be improved. Stories can be remembered. Roads can be rebuilt. Water systems can be repaired. A child can learn from a parent, and an apprentice can learn from a master. Civilization continues through transmission. The ancient river systems were therefore also systems of learning. Every successful canal represented accumulated experience. Every reliable well reflected knowledge of the landscape. Every working irrigation system represented generations of observation. Every bridge reflected engineering traditions. Every boat carried knowledge of water. The physical infrastructure was the visible expression of invisible knowledge. Today, modern science allows us to understand rivers in ways ancient communities could not. We can measure rainfall across entire continents, map watersheds from satellites, calculate river discharge, model floods, study groundwater, trace sediment, and monitor changes from space. Yet, despite this enormous knowledge, the fundamental challenge remains familiar. We still need to decide how much water to use, where to store it, how to transport it, how to protect communities from floods, and how to maintain rivers for future generations. The ancient questions have not disappeared. They have simply become larger. Modern cities depend upon enormous water systems, but they remain vulnerable to drought and flooding. Agriculture still depends upon predictable water. Hydroelectric systems depend upon rivers. Ecosystems depend upon wetlands and natural flows. Communities continue to compete over shared watersheds. Rivers still cross political boundaries. Decisions made upstream can affect people downstream. The old lesson remains: Water connects everything. A river does not recognize a political border. A cloud does not recognize a country. Rain falls where weather sends it. Water moves according to gravity. Human boundaries exist within these physical systems. This is why rivers have always encouraged cooperation and sometimes conflict. People need to share them because no community completely owns the water cycle. One village may depend upon water that passes through another. One city may depend upon a river that begins hundreds of kilometers away. One country may rely upon a watershed shared with several others. The ancient world experienced smaller versions of these problems, and the modern world continues to face them at enormous scale. Yet for tonight, we can leave those modern questions behind and return to the quiet river. The sun is higher now. The mist has disappeared. The city is awake. Boats begin moving. Farmers walk toward their fields. People gather near wells. Markets begin to open. Water continues flowing beneath bridges and along channels. The civilization is alive because the river is alive. And perhaps somewhere on the edge of the settlement, an old person sits quietly beside the water, watching the current move past. They may have seen hundreds of floods and dry seasons. They may remember when a bridge stood farther upstream. They may know stories about earlier generations. They may understand the river in ways that no written document can fully explain. They watch the water because watching the water is something human beings have done for a very long time. The river carries a leaf past them, then another. A small branch turns slowly in the current. Sunlight moves across the surface. The water continues toward the sea, and the story continues without an ending, because there is no final river. Every river joins another. Every stream comes from somewhere. Every drop is part of a larger cycle. Rain becomes runoff. Runoff becomes a stream. Streams become rivers. Rivers become wetlands and deltas. Water reaches the sea. Evaporation lifts it again. Clouds form. Rain returns to mountains. The cycle begins again. Civilization exists inside this cycle. It always has. Before the first city, there was water. Before the first king, there was water. Before the first written record, there was water. Before the first monument, water was already shaping the land. And long after the names of ancient rulers have faded, the rivers will continue. Perhaps that is the quietest truth hidden beneath the entire story. Civilization feels enormous when we stand inside it. Cities seem permanent. Buildings seem solid. Borders seem fixed. History seems like a sequence of great events. But from the perspective of a river, human history is a thin layer of activity beside a much older process. The water was flowing before us. It flows around us, and it will flow beyond us. So tonight, as the imagined ancient landscape grows quiet again, let the river become the final sound of the journey. Imagine the sun lowering beyond distant hills. Imagine the fields becoming silhouettes. Imagine the city lights beginning to appear one by one. Imagine a boat returning slowly toward the bank. Imagine the river reflecting the last pale colors of the sky. The day's movement fades. The river remains. The sound of water becomes softer as darkness returns. A few birds call from the reeds. The wind moves gently across the surface. Somewhere in the distance, a settlement settles into sleep. And beneath it all, the hidden river continues its journey. It has carried civilizations. It has carried travelers. It has carried food. It has carried ideas. It has carried soil from mountains to plains. It has shaped valleys and floodplains. It has created boundaries and connections. It has fed fields and filled wells. It has inspired stories and sacred traditions. It has witnessed cities rise. It has witnessed cities disappear. And still it flows, not hurried, not waiting, simply moving. Perhaps this is why rivers are such fitting companions for sleep. Their movement asks nothing from us. We do not have to follow every drop. We do not have to know where every current is going. We can simply listen. The water moves through darkness, just as it has moved through darkness for thousands of years. And as we leave the ancient cities behind, the river becomes the only guide. It carries us past forgotten settlements, past fields where no farmer now works, past old bridges whose stones have disappeared, past buried channels hidden beneath modern ground, past temples whose names have been forgotten, past forests and mountains, toward the sea. The civilization fades from view. The river remains. The final sound is not a king's voice. It is not the sound of an army. It is not the construction of a monument. It is water moving gently over stones. The same simple movement that existed before civilization began. The same movement that will continue long after another civilization takes its place. And somewhere beneath the quiet darkness, hidden rivers are still flowing, carrying water, carrying soil, carrying memory, carrying life, building, shaping, connecting, and quietly reminding us that every great civilization begins with something remarkably simple: water.